Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. I'm Molly from the New Hampshire Department of Education, the Bureau of Student Wellness and Nutrition, and I'm so excited today to be joined by Alyssa to talk about ABA in Tier 1. Alyssa, could you introduce yourself?
Sure, Molly. My name is Alyssa Johnson. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and I'm the director of behavioral health with Constellations Behavioral Services.
Thank you. So today in talking about Tier 1, hopefully you caught our last video, which was a high-level overview of MTSSB. But just to quickly remind ourselves of Tier 1 in MTSSB, or the multi-tiered system of support for behavioral health and wellness, we're talking about a tier that supports all students. When we say Tier 1, we're expecting any student, regardless of services they receive across Tier 2 or Tier 3, that they'll be captured in Tier 1 as foundational preventative supports and services. Tier 1 could look like a prepackaged SEL curriculum that had been purchased, or it could look like homegrown behavioral health and wellness skills that we're teaching our students. And it's often paired with things like positive behavior expectations, or essentially setting that foundational expectation of what behaviors look like, so every student and staff knows how to exist and work together in the school climate or culture. So knowing that about Tier 1, I'm curious to have a little more background about ABA. Is it an intervention you plug into Tier 1? Is it a strategy teachers use? What does ABA look like?
Thanks for asking that, Molly, because I think it's a great launch point for people to understand what applied behavior analysis actually is. I have a lot of people who will say to me, I've heard of that philosophy before, or, that therapy. But what we need to know about ABA is that it actually is the science of behavior change. And it's the applied science. So we take everything that we know, all of the evidence, all of the behavioral principles that we know are responsible for changing behavior. And we apply that to real life situations and to things that are really meaningful to improve the lives of others. So when we take that concept of an applied behavioral science and we apply it to the school system, and more specifically to MTSSB, where ABA comes into play is that it's able to support those systems to really bolster them to be as strong and effective as possible. So at the Tier 1 level, as you mentioned, that's supports for everybody. And what I find is that there are a myriad of different things that can fall into high fidelity Tier 1. So as you mentioned, that could be curriculum around SEL or other things that students might need. It can be very environmental, right? Environmental arrangement, making sure there's messaging and reminders for students about expectations. And Tier 1 really lives throughout the entire building. So it's not just in a classroom, and once you step out of the classroom, Tier 1 doesn't go away. It really should be existing in the hallways, the lunchroom, the playground, etc. So where ABA comes in, for one, if you know anything about ABA, or if you know a behavior analyst in your life, you know that we are pretty crazy about data collection. We use data to drive our decisions. And so if we see that anything is or is not working, we use that information to make determination if we should continue on our path or if we need to pivot and try something different. So data collection is a really big piece of Tier 1 supports. Some of the other things that we're able to do is really work with teachers to help them adopt some of the new behaviors or practices that would be associated with high fidelity Tier 1. We do that in a really collaborative way. So instead of just telling people, you should be doing this, this is what Tier 1 would say, or this is what high fidelity Tier 1 is, we would really look to take an approach of more of a coaching model. When we train people in new skills or strategies, we use something that's called BST, or the Behavioral Skills Training Model. It's an evidence-based model to training and teaching. A lot of people know it as I do, we do, you do. So we would go in, work with teachers, but instead of telling them what to do, we would really want to take the approach of modeling for them first. explaining the skill, modeling the skill, giving them an opportunity to try the skill with us, and then of course, giving them some feedback if that's needed, to ensure that the teachers are feeling really supported and really successful in those tier 1 strategies. So we find that ABA is just a really nice overlay to the tier 1 systems.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up data. I think it's an important piece of all of our work, is that we're proving that the things that we're implementing to support students are actually having a positive impact on students. It sounds like the way ABA therapy supports at tier 1 is really to bolster the skills of the teacher so that they're able to then, provide positive supports for students. Am I hearing that right? Or, like, how does an ABA therapist interact in the classroom?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So what I described is really kind of a one-to-one consultative model, right? So you could absolutely have a behavior analyst or somebody trained in ABA going into a classroom and really supporting that implementation of all those tier 1 supports, and of which, again, there's a lot that we could really discuss in that list. But that's not the only way that the behavior analyst or someone from a behavior analytic company might support the tier 1 model. So I want to make it also clear that a lot of the tier 1 supports that we end up doing are at the system level or at the administrative level. Because we know that, to see good behavior change and to see really positive climate and culture, that has to start with our leadership too, right? And we have to be able to bleed that down through all of the systems. And like I said, the cafeteria staff and the UA specialists and, your special ed department, everybody in the building should be interacting with students and each other with the same, goals and same positive interaction in mind. So sometimes our consultation is more at the system level and helping to really make changes at a kind of a higher level than just at the classroom level.
You remind me of one last thing before we part ways for this video, but I think just leveraging ABA therapists as community partners, when we're thinking about MTSSB, we're constantly thinking about how do we expand services outside the school building? Because the school does a lot, but they can't do everything. And I think including individuals like you or other ABA agencies on tier 1 teams or at the district community level as well is a great way to just quick and easy plug ABA into your MTSSB framework.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And I think it's just a really nice way to bring somebody with, that kind of evidence-based scope of behavior change. Because when we talk about behavior, we're really talking about anything a person does, right? So oftentimes what we find is that people have a negative connotation with that word behavior. So for example, Molly, if I'm speaking to a mom and I say, hey, I'd really like to talk with you later on about your child's behavior today. Without even a negative tone in my voice, what kind of comes to mind for you, Molly, when I say that?
Oh yeah, my child did something horrible. I've just
right.
Yeah,
absolutely. As a society, we have a negative connotation with that word behavior, which is really unfortunate. But what I'd love our listeners to know, our audience to know, is that word behavior truly just means anything that a person does. So that applies to learning new skills, such as how to compute, 3-digit multiplication problems, how to read sight words, really anything that we do or that we learn, that's a behavior. And so all of those things can be taught and reinforced. And so when we know that we have a behavioral science that's responsible for promoting new behaviors in someone's repertoire, it only makes sense that we would apply it to something like good high fidelity tier 1 structures.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today and kind of illustrating how we can leverage ABA, not just in those most individualized services at tier 3, but really to support all students. So thank you guys for tuning in. We encourage you to leave questions and comments down below. We're hoping to have a Q&A session at the end of this series to address these comments with the experts. And I want to encourage you to check out the other videos in our series. The next one coming up will highlight tier 2. Have a great day.
Thank you.